Welcome to the Truth and Liberty Show, where trusted leaders bring biblical insights to important issues to help you stand for truth and effect godly change in our nation and in our world.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Truth and Liberty Show. If you're a homeowner or a prospective homeowner, and you've ever gone to look at a house that's for sale, and you see cracks in the walls on the inside of that house, what's the first question that comes to your mind? Well, I bet it's, gee, is this a foundational problem or is this just dried plaster problem? We all know intuitively that a cracked foundation or an improperly laid foundation is something no homeowner ever wants to have to deal with. The Bible says in Psalms chapter 11, verse 3, if the foundations be destroyed, what can the righteous do? I believe the foundations of the United States of America are under attack and actually are in grave danger of being lost. The foundation in a building is the bottom layer of that building. It is what holds up the rest of the building. The building is only going to last as long as the foundation. The weaker the foundation is, the less stable, or you might say the weaker the building. It doesn't matter how much damage the structure above the foundation sustains, you can always rebuild it or repair that. But if the foundation itself is damaged beyond repair, then the whole building is lost, even if the part that's above ground appears to be just fine. If you have to rebuild the foundation of a building, then you are essentially starting over. Jesus talked about the importance of building on the proper foundation. In Matthew chapter 7, he said, therefore, whosoever heareth these sayings of mine, and doeth them, I will liken him unto a wise man, which built his house upon a rock. And the rain descended, and the floods came, and the winds blew, and beat upon that house, and it fell not, for it was founded upon a rock. And everyone that heareth these sayings of mine, and doeth them not, shall be likened unto a foolish man, which built his house upon the sand. And the rain descended, and the floods came, and the winds blew, and beat upon that house, and it fell, and great was the fall of it. Note in this parable of Jesus from Matthew 7, the foundation that he's referring to, the foundation for human life, is the Word of God. Jesus said, whoever hears these sayings of mine and doeth them, and builds on that foundation, is going to endure the storm. Jesus himself in the Bible is the chief cornerstone. You can see this in many scriptures. For example, Isaiah 28:16. This verse says, therefore thus saith the Lord God, behold, I lay in Zion for a foundation, a stone. He's laying a foundation. He's laying a stone to be part of a foundation. That's what the prophet Isaiah is saying in 28:16. And then he says, a tried stone, a precious cornerstone, a sure foundation. He that believeth shall not make haste, or shall not be ashamed. 1 Peter 2:6 says, going to the New Testament, wherefore also it is contained in the Scripture, behold, I lay in Zion a chief cornerstone, elect, precious, and he that believeth on him shall not be confounded. Ephesians chapter 2, verses 19 and 20. Now, therefore, you are no more strangers and foreigners, but fellow citizens with the saints and of the household of God, and are built, Peter's calling us that we are stones here, and he says, you are built upon the foundation of the apostles and prophets, Jesus Christ himself being the chief cornerstone. So, what's a cornerstone? A cornerstone is the first stone laid in a masonry foundation. You see, back then, they didn't have concrete like we have today. They didn't pour concrete. The foundation was made of stones, typically cut stones, right? And the very first stone that is laid is called the cornerstone. And it determines every other stone that is laid off of that stone. So the cornerstone determines the alignment of every other stone in the building. Both the width and the depth and the height of the building and its configuration all draw from that cornerstone. For over 100 years in America, the foundation of our nation now has been under attack. And considering the level and scope and severity of the attack, it is absolutely miraculous that America is still standing. And it's a testament to the fact that our foundation is God and His Word, and to the divine guidance that was given to our founding fathers in the way that they built this country. You know, in a series, it's been a series for 100 plus years now, a series of waves, many waves, of false ideas that have slapped the shores of our nation, that have come against the foundation of this great building called America. I liken the beginning to the teaching of evolution and Charles Darwin. Charles Darwin said, "Oh, God didn't make us, we made ourselves. Nature made us, and we're one with nature. You see, we're just an accident, a series of millions of random mutations over billions of years, and lo and behold, humanity. And by the way, we're continuing to evolve and get better and better. And how do we do this? Through survival of the fittest and natural selection, not God's selection, nature's selection. So the person that is better equipped, smarter, more nimble, whatever, is more worthy of life than the other one." Another lie that has assaulted the foundations of this nation is something called secular humanism. Humanism began in the 19th century and grew over time and was really unleashed on popular culture in the beginning parts of the 20th century. Secular humanism says there is no God. We are the only ones that exist, human beings, and so we're going to worship ourselves. We're the ones, through reason and intellect, are able to chart our own path. And religion, you know, it's okay if you want to hold on to it, but keep it out of the public square, out of the public life, because we only want to deal with what's real. Okay? So they're saying religion, you're not real. Belief in God, you're fake. Everybody who believes that way, you're sort of a second-class person because you don't even have a brain. This is the implication from it. It hit America in the 1920s and 30s, and it has taken over our public school system, our courts, our government, and it paved the way for the introduction of many, many immoral, ungodly philosophies, like sexual promiscuity. What's the Bible commandments about sex? Who cares about that? That's an old-fashioned, outdated, a book that's full of superstitions. We should be able to love like we want to love. We should be able to do the act with anybody we want to do it with. It doesn't matter. No-fault divorce. Oh, marriage, it's just a, prejudicial means of oppressing women set up by patriarchal societies to gain hegemony and dominate. And, who needs it? We need no-fault divorce. Women need to be able to get out of marriage anytime they want for any reason, and men too, for that matter. Okay? Feminism. Oh, women can do anything men can do just as good or better. Men, you're evil. You oppress us. We have equal rights. We want equal pay. We get to do whatever we want, including no-fault divorce, including not having children, and including abortion. By the way, women are equal, but they're not made the same as men, right? There are differences, and that's why God set up the institution of marriage. But I digress. Another evil doctrine is homosexuality. Well, since there's no boundaries on sex, what's wrong with homosexual sex? And erosion of the family unit. Now, family in America can mean pretty much whatever you want it to mean. It can mean a group of people living together. It can mean someone who's been divorced 15 times. It can mean someone who has 6 wives. It can mean anything. Moral relativism. Oh, there's nothing that's absolutely right or wrong. It just depends on the circumstances. And by the way, so there's no truth. That's called nihilism. Since there's no truth, you can't tell me what's right or wrong. It's up for me to decide. I have my truth, you have your truth. Don't let the government be telling us what's true or anything like that. Stay out of our moral affairs. We're going to each decide for ourselves. This is how we have rioting in our streets today. Nihilists called, anarchists, and all of the rioting and the destruction that's going in. And it paved the way for the introduction of socialism. More and more government control, more and more government regulation because we don't recognize God. We don't recognize the authority of His Word. We're trying desperately to hold our civilization together, but at the same time rejecting the commandments of God that are responsible for that civilization. So we kick God out, so we resort to more and more government, making government God, and that's called socialism. We have increased subsidies, increased handouts, increased dependency, increased victimhood mentality. Guys in Hawaii, I love Hawaii. In our most recent trip to Hawaii, we went to the Big Island, and on the Big Island, they have a beach that's called the Black Beach. And the reason is because the sand is actually black. It's really cool looking. It gets especially hot, even more than the white sand. But the black beach is formed by waves over, I don't know how many years, maybe a century, maybe 2 centuries, maybe 3, 4, 5 centuries, beating constantly, repetitively, over and over again against the volcanic rock, pulverizing that rock, destroying the rock, and creating a sand beach. Lots of fun to play on, lots of fun to take pictures on, but the rock is demolished. Well, that's how it is in America today. The waves of these ungodly ideas and philosophies, beginning with evolution and secular humanism and all the derivatives of it, that reject God and the authority of His Word, have been beating relentlessly on the foundation of God and His Word that this nation was built on. And we now are getting very close in this country to a pulverized foundation. And we're losing our families, we're losing morality in the country, we're losing free enterprise as God's commandments are widely rejected. And the basic principles of individual rights, equality under the law for all, with freedom and limited government, these are being replaced with Marxist notions like critical race theory, LGBT special rights, silencing speech, discriminating against churches and Christians, and many other things. You know, the people of the city of New York, the financial capital of the world, just elected a socialist mayor. That tells you they have no idea who they are or what made the city great. So what do we need to do? Well, remember, Psalm 11 verse 3 says, if the foundations are destroyed, what can the righteous do? Well, I want to say today, the foundation in America is not yet completely destroyed. What needs to happen is the church laid that foundation in the beginning because America was birthed out of faith in God. People came to this land in order to have freedom of worship and to live out their lives according to the dictates of their own conscience and to build a Christian society. The Declaration of Independence and the American Revolution were products of the First Great Awakening. So the church laid the foundation for this nation, and it is the church that must repair the foundation. The Church of Jesus Christ must rise up and teach the foundational principles. And we can only save this nation, we can only repair the foundation if we do this. Well, folks, I have a really special guest with us today to talk about the Judeo-Christian foundations of America, the biblical foundations, and how it has been eroded and what we need to do about it. And this guest is Rabbi Daniel Lapin. He's one of America's most courageous and eloquent culture warriors fighting secular fundamentalism. He ardently believes and persuasively demonstrates that America's success derives from our commitment to our Judeo-Christian foundations, in other words, the Bible, the biblical attitude on marriage and money and everything else. And he advocates that abandoning these principles imperils all that we hold dear. Rabbi Lapin was the founding rabbi of the Pacific Jewish Center, now legendary Orthodox Jewish Synagogue in Venice, California. He's the president of the American Alliance of Jews and Christians, a national movement to unite Jewish and Christian, or bring about Jewish and Christian cooperation in the areas of family, faith, and fortunes. And he's the headline speaker for hundreds of companies, organizations, and institutions, and was the keynote speaker at the Congressional opening of the 106th Congress in Washington, D.C. So we're going to take a short break here and share some important information with you. And when we come back, we're going to sit down with an amazing interview of Rabbi Daniel Lapin. Let me remind you of our free product giveaway today. It's Andrew Wommack's booklet, Who Made You God? Love the title of that. But this is an incredible booklet. You want to get a copy of this by going to our website at truthandlibertygtn.com, where if you share your email with us, we'll be sure to send a free copy of that to you today. So in just a minute, we'll be right back with Rabbi Daniel Lapin. You won't want to miss this, so don't go away.
America needs Christians of steadfast faith to stand up and boldly proclaim the promises of God. Faith for America by Richard Harris shows how the prayers and steadfast faith of ordinary believers can carry a nation through its darkest hours. Now is the time to stand firm, pray boldly, and keep fighting for freedom, trusting God to bring light from tragedy. Order your copy today.
All right, everybody, welcome back to the Truth and Liberty Show. As I mentioned in the monologue, my special guest today is Rabbi Daniel Lapin. I am so excited to have him on the show today because I've heard about him for years and years, heard him speak a couple of times. But Rabbi, thank you for coming on Truth and Liberty today. It's an honor for us to have you as our guest.
And it's an honor and a privilege for me to be with you. I've known of the show and of your work for so many years, and I'm honored to be among the distinguished people that you have interviewed here before.
Well, thank you. Well, Rabbi, you have done so much work in the field of sort of the application of biblical principles to our culture and using God's word and wisdom to look at, the troubles and difficulties that we're facing today. But so it's my understanding that you believe the secret to America's greatness is that our country was built on Judeo-Christian principles and values. Can you explain that for our audience?
I'd love to. Look, everybody from the most primitive tribesman in New Guinea to an advertising executive in the city of London or business professionals in Frankfurt, Germany, or professors in Paris, everybody recognizes that alone and isolated, we live hard, brutal, short lives, as Thomas Hobbes once said. And the life of the subsistence peasant, living alone in isolation and solitude, not a good life. Everybody recognizes that connection with other human beings is vital. Now, some primitive societies solve that by relying on family and clan. And we find that a lot in the Islamic world, parts of Africa as well. But the idea of a group of people unifying for common benefit, that actually is the secret. And the unification is not based on blood, but it's based on values and ideas. And there are two basic ways to do that. One is a God-centric way in which his word and his message to mankind, the Bible, is the defining document of civilization. And indeed, as I'll be able to show later on in our conversation, Western civilization, with all its bells and whistles, is a direct outgrowth of the Bible. But that's only one way of doing it. There is another way of doing it, and that is to unify people not through their love and fealty to God, but through their hatred and antagonism towards God. And we call that socialism or communism or progressivism, but you'll notice that the common feature throughout every manifestation of socialist tyranny, whether it's Cuba or the Soviet Union or China or or obviously even on university campuses in the United States of America, the common feature every single time is hostility to faith. And so, for instance, at the end of the 18th century, when the French Revolution took hold, their first targets was the Catholic Church. When communism took hold in parts of Central and South America, again, the first target is the church, because socialism and religion, godly biblical religion, cannot coexist, not at all. And so you have to decide one or the other. And America chose to construct a society where people's connection was welded by their relationship to God and the Bible through Christianity.
That's an amazing tour of a lot of history. So America, though, was founded on principles like freedom of religion, freedom of speech. There was no established state, at least at the federal level, at the very beginning. So, and I'm playing a little bit of the devil's advocate with you, but
Yeah.
how is it that you can say that our nation was founded around or built on the Bible when we embraced freedom of thought and religion?
That was the genius of the founding fathers. Almost without exception, all of them Bible-believing Christians. And what they did, for instance, is introduced fundamental ideas that under no circumstances are embraced by the alternative strategy for building a society, namely through socialism or progressivism or whatever particular sanitized term one wants to use. And so, for instance, centrality of family. It's not that women didn't have the vote. It's that women lived either with their parents or with their husbands. Most women moved from their parents' home to their husband's home. And in their own home, the family had a vote through the father, but it was a vote in which the woman had a great deal to say. And very few men disregard their wives' interests and philosophies. But in general, those tended to run in synchronization with the husbands, because, as we know, even in contemporary voting patterns in America, married women with children vote far more conservatively than single women or single women with children. And so what happened was that women and men to whom they were married decided how they wanted to vote. They had a stake in the future. They have children, and they had an interest in what was happening, and they voted. It was a totally biblical perspective. No hostility to women, no patriarchy, no tired, worn out cliches of gender battle. Just let's be mature about it. That's how it used to work. Another example, if I might, Richard, is that in the socialist strategy for building a society, obviously family is not only not central, but it is regarded as negative. And so, with almost without exception, every policy prescription of the left will be hostile to families, will harm and imperil the integrity of the family unit. But there's something else as well, and that is the idea of ownership of private property.
Yes.
Ultimately, I mean, Marx made this very clear in his earliest writings, and he never deviated from it. And that is that ideally there is no private property. Property belongs to the state. And in Scripture, it's full of private property. The 5 books of Moses have more rigorous regulations and prescriptions on finance and property ownership and responsibility than it has on sacrificial rituals. So it's hugely central. And the founders had to make a decision early on. Are we going to build a society in which people own their own property and thereby attain true liberty, or not? And they again took the biblical viewpoint entirely opposite to the viewpoint taken by socialist and progressive societies. And so, those family and property are two examples, and there are many more. The idea of federalism based on the tribes of Israel, with the city of Jerusalem belonging to nobody, same as Washington, D.C. The idea from Isaiah, for the Lord is your king, the Lord is your lawmaker, and the Lord is your judge. That idea of dividing government into three parts: the king, executive, the judiciary, and the legislative, straight out of the book of Isaiah.
Well, and the founding fathers also, I think they, if I understand it correctly, they took inspiration from the Hebrew Republic, and not from the time of the kings of Israel. So we tend to miss that, I think, in our modern look at things, and don't
That's
realize
right.
the kings of Europe, they always appealed to the authority of the king in the Bible, but they ignored the fact that Israel lived and prospered for 400 and something years before King Saul came along. And
Yeah.
Can you comment on that, on the Hebrew Republic, Rabbi?
Well, it's not only the Hebrew Republic, but don't forget the English jurist John Locke, through
Yes.
his Part 1 and Part 2 treatises on the law. The first one is heavily, and if you look into it, you'd be astonished at how much he quotes from the Old Testament repeatedly and ongoing. And so the role that John Locke played and as you know, the founders were all extremely familiar with John Locke and depended on him extensively in building the Constitution. That was all Old Testament based and on the idea that a king may or may not be a good idea, but it's never a necessary requirement, and that the idea was that each and every Israelite had his own piece of land, and he had his own fig tree, and he sat under his fig tree and took care of his own interests and prospered. He participated in trade and business with everybody else. The whole idea of specialization. Adam Smith in 1776 writes his book about the wealth of nations, hugely influential. And again, the founders, although he was in Scotland, not in America, he was hugely influential. And one of the things that he does is he shows that specialization works to the advantage of everybody. Again, getting rid of the idea of the subsistence peasant who makes his own shoes and milks his own cow and gets his own eggs and sows his own wheat and makes his own bread, and his wife makes the family's clothing from the wool and the cotton that they grow, completely independently from everybody else. And people like that are working 24/7 and still only barely surviving.
Yeah.
And as soon as trade started, as soon as specialization entered, everything changed. Now, Adam Smith, his book doesn't reveal where he found the idea. Maybe he thought of it, but of course, in the end of Genesis, Father Jacob blesses his 12 sons, or 13 at that point, actually, and he does it. Instead of doing what I would do, which is just say, guys, you know what? We've had ups and downs. There are times you've been good and wonderful sons. There are other times you've been pretty tough to live with. But God bless you all. I'm going home to the Lord. And I would have dealt with it in 1 or 2 sentences. And instead, it takes nearly 30 verses, because he goes through each one, Reuben and Simon and Levi and Yehuda, and every one of them, because each one provides a separate, necessary dimension to the full Republican life of the community. And then Moses does the same thing at the end of Deuteronomy. And, I might have said, hey, people of Israel, I'll be honest, you've been a gigantic pain in the neck the last 40 years, but it doesn't matter because it's Joshua's problem from now. And I wish you luck. Godspeed to the land of Canaan. I'm out of here. Goodbye. But instead, Moses again emphasizes the need for specialization. And he speaks about each particular tribe, what they will contribute and what they do and what their advantages are. And again, just another way in which the founders understood that the Old Testament was not a book of narrative about anachronistic events and long forgotten people, but it is actually an up-to-the-minute guide to building a functioning, long-term, durable society.
Wow, that's really fascinating. And I think that's a big part of what you do, isn't it, Rabbi, is bringing that wisdom from the Old Covenant, the Old Testament to bear in our modern culture. I've heard some Christian pastors lately saying things like, well, I believe in the New Covenant, and so we don't even read or teach from the Old Covenant. And that seems to be a really foolish approach, if you want my opinion. Of course, I know that... Well, what do you think?
Well, I think it's an appalling idea because one of the ways that the what we call the Tanakh or the Old Testament is distinguished is how very practical it is about two areas that are absolutely vital to structuring an enduring and successful civilization or society, and that is money and sex. Money and male-female relationships. And, it's hard to imagine any book containing more rigorous and more detailed data on the very necessary rules and regulations and restrictions and even rituals that govern interpersonal economic interaction and male-female interaction. Let me put it this way, Richard, just by way of an example. Let's sort of reduce the grandiose world of society building and civilization structuring. Let's reduce it to a teacher who goes on a boat trip. He takes his class of 30 high school boys on a boat trip. Remember the old sitcom that used to gather the family around every Monday night years and years and years ago? It was called Gilligan's Island.
Oh, yes.
And they were trapped.
I was raised on Gilligan's Island.
Well, as you'll recall, they were trapped on a desert isle.
Yes.
And so bear with me for just a moment as I lay out what happens as 30 boys and their teacher land on this desert island. The first thing is, they have no idea when they're going to be rescued. And so the teacher's first responsibility is he wants to make sure that they're going to be alive when rescue does arrive. And so there's questions of water and food and shelter. And so the smart teacher divides his 30 boys into several groups. He sends one group to go fishing in the lagoon. He sends another group to go searching for a water source. He gets another group to go looking for vegetables and fruit. And he gets another group to see if they can hunt some wild pigs on the island. And so he does everything he can to provide that. He may set one group to start building a shelter. At any rate, some of the groups are fairly successful, some more so, some less so. But at any rate, that night they gather in the shelter and they light a fire and they kind of, they feel this might work. I mean, they actually have water, they have food that they can last. The next day, teacher he has a problem. Right away, the guys who had to climb the hills looking for wild pigs say it's not fair. This time it's our turn to go to the lagoon and fish, because they had a great time on the beach in the sun. We were working. We came home sweaty and dirty. Now the teacher knows that specialization is the way to go. and that the boys who went fishing are going to do better the next day fishing than they did yesterday, whereas if you send a totally new group to the beach, they're going to do just as badly as the group did on the first day. So he's got to somehow find a way of getting people to be satisfied with the roles in which they're placed. Not an easy task. A little further down the road, it becomes apparent that he's got slackers. He's got guys who goof off while they're out of his sight. They come back claiming to have been working and finding fruit and veggies, but they're not really doing anything. His problem now is, do people who don't work get to eat? In other words, do they divide up all the food and everybody eats? Or is it now going to have to be, you eat what you kill?
Mm-hmm.
There are a lot of problems here, Richard. This teacher has by no means a guaranteed roadmap to survival. And this may turn out to be a lot more like William Golding's novel Lord of the Flies, about boys stuck on an island, than about that silly, ultimately forgettable movie Blue Lagoon. And so this is not simple. Now, I put it to you that we're going to up the ante a little bit. And now the teacher has not just 30 boys, but he's got 15 boys and 15 girls of high school age. How's he going to handle that? And you see very quickly that the fundamental issues that have to be resolved are eating, which is money, work, and sex. How are you going to deal with that? Is he going to allow it? In which case there are going to be more than 30 people on the island soon. And who feeds pregnant and nursing girls? The group, or just one man who got her pregnant? These are issues that have to be resolved.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And so when you say that there are people who eject the teachings of the Tanakh, of the Old Testament, I have two words for them. Good luck.
Yeah, it's incredibly foolish, and but Rabbi, I'd like to kind of go back to something you said about socialism, that it's sort of the antithesis. It's sort of like the camp for those who hate God, and yes, whereas a free republic under natural law is for those who love God. That's
yes,
a really
it's the only way it can work.
Yeah. It is true statistically that the more socialistic a country becomes, the lower church attendance gets. If you look at Western Europe and France, for example, and that's an interesting correlation, isn't it? Why do you suppose that is? That if the government becomes bigger, stronger, and more is it that it becomes more your source, and so you forget about God? Or is there something else going on?
No, there's something else going on. By way of example, if there's an accident tragically and a plane comes down, the NTSB get together and the FAA get together, and all the agencies get together to figure out why the plane came out of the sky and fell down and killed people. And because of that, we have the incredibly safe and effective air transport system that America has built. However, not to sound obnoxiously smart, but I know I don't need them to tell me why the plane came down. I know the answer. I can do it in one word: gravity.
Yes.
The question is not why the plane came down. The question is, why did the plane stay up there? That's the amazing thing. And then we go into how remarkable it is that the chemical fuel, the chemical energy stored in jet fuel, can be released in an engine, and that engine can produce thrust, and the wings can convert thrust into lift, and the controls can keep the plane traveling in the direction it's supposed to go. And obviously, if something interferes with the fuel going to the engine, or with the thrust being produced, or with the wings providing lift, or with the control, the plane will come down. It's gravity that'll bring it down, absolutely reliably. The question is not what fails in society. That is the natural default. Because if my teacher in my earlier example does not say to the students, we are going to be following the guidance of the Bible on everything, and that is how it's going to be. This is what we're going to do, and this is how we're going to do it. They're doomed, because the natural default condition is chaos through the process of entropy.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's the reason what happens in Europe is that if you take away the pipeline of energy flow into a society, which is God and Scripture, remove the Bible, what you're going to have is spiritual gravity kicking in through the force of entropy, in exactly the same way as if you have a beautiful garden and then I come and visit you 6 months later and it's a jungle. And I say, Richard, what did you do to make a jungle? You say, I didn't do anything. I just stopped gardening. That's right. The jungle is the natural default. The beautiful garden is the remarkable exception. And so what America built and sustained over the last 250 years is the exception. It's hard to do.
Yes.
And what we're watching in many other parts of the world, including the countries you alluded to, is nature, entropy, and spiritual gravity taking over. Societies, if deprived of biblical energy, will automatically devolve into socialist tyrannies. That is going to happen absolutely reliably. And part of that is the abolition of private ownership. People are not going to be able to own their property. And number two, elimination of faith, because the socialist tyranny, and we are already seeing that in the United Kingdom, in France, and in many other countries, that socialist tyranny can brook no challenges to its central authority.
Mm-hmm.
And what gives me independence, what gives me as a citizen of the United States independence, is not so much the Constitution and the Bill of Rights as it is God and my property. As long as I have property and I've got money, I don't need the government. And I pay my taxes, and that's it. I have to follow the laws, but I don't have to stand in line to beg the government for anything. And as far as authority is concerned, even if the government tells me that I have to, shall we say, work on Saturday, which is my Sabbath, my answer is I answer to a higher authority.
Mm-hmm.
And so there is a very obvious and clear reason why socialist tyrannies will always do everything in their power to abolish the church.
So, does it make any sense then for believers, Jewish and Christian alike, to take the position that we should not bring God or the Bible into public debate, that we should allow it to remain, I'll use the word secular, even though that's a non-biblical term, to say that's off limits for faith and religion. That's a different arena.
It's a terrible idea. It's a terrible idea because the forces of secularism do employ their guidebooks. They do employ their philosophies. They do employ their statements of faith. And if we do not, we are dangerously deprived of the energy that drives us. And so the left is full of sanctimonious ritual. The idea that social justice for all. And they use that to energize the masses behind them.
Yeah.
You got to remember,
sure.
The United States of America, Donald Trump may have won in 2024, but it wasn't by a huge margin. You've still got nearly half the country who believes the other way.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, so you have a product, a book I wanted to mention. It's called Tower of Power. It sounds like a ride at Disney World, but no, I'm just joking. Tower of Power, Decoding the Secrets of Babel. Can you comment on what that is? Because it's a fascinating title. If I understand correctly, it relates to what we're talking about.
Oh, it goes to the very heart of what we're talking about. You're right. It's very short. It's 9 mysterious verses at the beginning of chapter 11 of Genesis. That's it. That presents the entire spiritual foundation of secularism, socialism, progressivism, liberalism, whatever you want to call it. And the way it does that is by highlighting, by repeated references, stones and bricks. And in those 11 verses, God beautifully captures the fundamental difference between a biblical government and a socialist government. The biblical government views us citizens as stones. The secular government views citizens as bricks. What's the difference? The difference is that stones are made by God, bricks are made by man.
Yes.
Stones are unique. Each and every one is unique. If you like, it has its own unique fingerprint. Bricks, the whole point of bricks is they're made exactly the same, as anybody who's played with Lego understands. That's the whole concept. They didn't make a toy with little miniature plastic stones and rocks. It would frustrate every child who touched it. No, it's identical little bricks. And so that is the question. Do you view human beings as interchangeable building blocks of society, or do you recognize and celebrate the intrinsic uniqueness of each and every human being? And if you go the former, you are destined to doom and oblivion. No society built on the Tower of Babel model has endured for very long. The Soviet Union, had its 70 years, just like the Babylonian Empire under Nebuchadnezzar. It doesn't have a long durability.
I don't
But
know if we have. I don't know if we have time to unpack this, but I have an idea on this as well, if I could run it past you. So in the beginning, the Lord said, "Be fruitful and multiply and replenish the earth." Nimrod, though, seemed to be saying, don't spread out across the earth. Let's all gather together, and let's have a centralized authority here and build something that will reach to heaven. And it seemed like man was trying to be God in direct violation of God's plan. Do you see that in the Tower of Babel story as well? And does that correlate to socialism versus free enterprise in a God-based society?
Well, you'd have no interest really in what I see or what I think or what my opinion of the Tower of Babel is, because I'm just another person with many flawed ideas and an occasional good one. But I like saying everybody needs a rabbi. Now, that's not only a means of guaranteeing my full employment, but I think everybody needs a rabbi precisely because of something you brought up earlier, Richard, which is that the Hebrew scriptures have much to offer. But the problem is that they are written in the Lord's language. They are written in Hebrew, which one of the founding pilgrims in 1620 in the New England colony, he became a governor of that colony afterwards. His name was William Bradford, and he wrote and published the very first history of America. It was the history of the Plymouth Plantation. And the first number of pages, maybe 10 or 15 pages, are written in Hebrew in his own handwriting in the manuscript.
I didn't know that. That's interesting.
And he writes and he says, in case you wonder about that, as everybody knows, Hebrew is the Lord's language. It's the language in which God spoke to the patriarchs of old, and it's the language in which Noah named all animals. So I need to understand it and know it, and sure enough, he does. And so the unpacking of the text, I'm afraid, is best done by somebody, I humbly submit myself as a candidate, who is familiar with the ancient Jewish wisdom. And by the way, it was what Jesus himself was familiar with, because this was written down 2,000 years ago. and it's called the Mishnah and it's called the Gemara, and so I'll be happy to tell you a little bit out. I mean, your instincts are very good on that, and the only thing I will tell you is that be fruitful and multiply is exactly what it. Well, let's put it this way: what it actually says. The Bible doesn't use terms to just sound poetical, and so be fruitful and multiply is not actually what the Hebrew says. The Hebrew says, be fruitful and educate your children, raise them correctly.
Well, that's a big difference.
Oh, it's a huge difference, because be fruitful and multiply, you might say, is what is happening in parts of Africa. They're not necessarily thriving. It's what's happening in parts of America where lots of children are being born, not into marriage. Lots of children are being born, not a functioning society. So no, having a child is the easy part. Raising the child correctly is another part of God's requirement. So that's a hugely significant insight from the actual Hebrew text. The next word was not replenish, but it's actually conquer. And I understand that with current sensitivities of environmentalism, it's very possible that a translator might say, oh, I don't want to say conquer. That sounds like, very unenvironmental. So I don't want to say that. But conquering isn't obliterating or destroying. Conquering is redirecting for our own benefit. And I say something now which is hugely important, and I know it's going to be something that you and I would both love to discuss extensively further. But hear me on this. There is a reason why the Industrial Revolution took place in England and Germany and Sweden and eventually in America, but not in Bangladesh and not in the Sudan and not anywhere else that was not rooted in Christianity. The overwhelming majority of inventions between the years 1850 and 1950, and I restrict my research to those years because the end of World War II changed a lot of things. But for those 100 years, over 89% of discoveries and inventions and made in Christian countries. Or Judeo-Christian countries. So there's a reason for that. And again, it's biblical. And again,
you're going to tease
could
us
elaborate on it,
but people need to get your product. They need to go to your website, what's your website, Rabbi?
It's wehappywarriors.com. We Happy Warriors. It's based on a poem by William Wordsworth. A happy warrior is somebody who tackles the challenges of life with a spring in his step and a smile on his face.
Absolutely. There's so much more.
So wehappywarriors.com. Here's a good thing, by the way, for all of our friends who are listening and watching at the present time. Use the coupon code TRUTH, TRUTH, and then the number 30, and you'll be very happy.
Truth 30 as a coupon code on wehappywarriors and .com and get the Tower of Power, Decoding the Secrets of Babel. Fascinating.
That's exactly right.
So Rabbi, quickly, we have about 4 minutes left, and I want you to comment on the notion of secular humanism, if you would, please. This got a lot of attention in the 90s, maybe the early 21st century here in America by cultural warriors, but I don't hear people talking about it anymore. But I believe that the philosophy of secularism is really at the core of our difficulty today. Can you comment on what is secular humanism and why is it important for us to know?
Well, it's just a fancy word for building a secular society. That's all. It's the end result of secular humanism, as many writers have pointed out, is of course socialist tyranny. That is where it inevitably leads, and again, the choice is before us. Where God says, "Here's the choice: choose. It's life and death. It's your choice. Whatever you want to do, you can do, but you'll have to live with the consequences." And choosing the Judeo-Christian vision of life leads to a durable lifestyle. It leads to a durable society of wealth and achievement and health. And you can choose the secular approach as well, in which case the end is going to be death and doom. It doesn't work well.
Yeah.
Where has secular humanism ever worked? It hasn't, and it won't.
But from a biblical perspective, the idea of secular humanism is that there's secular and then there's sacred. Well, of course, they don't call it sacred. But in most even Christian circles today, I feel that we have allowed that notion to pervade our thinking. And to me, it's an unbiblical division. There is no such thing as secular. Everything is
That's just what I was
belongs to God.
about to say.
Yeah, Psalm 24:1. Yeah.
Yeah, there's no such thing. Of course, you're exactly right. And so I think the important thing to remember is that the idea of separation of politics from religion is a silly, preposterous notion. And many people are shocked to discover that it's not part of the Declaration of Independence or the Constitution. It makes no sense because politics, if you think about it, what is politics? Politics is nothing other than the practical application of people's most deeply held values. And so, for instance, imposing confiscatory rates of taxation on hardworking, intact families in order to underwrite multi-generational family and financial dysfunction is somebody's value system. It isn't mine, but it is somebody's.
Yes.
And it's justified on those terms. That's why they use words like social justice.
Yes.
Because the only reason to justify exorbitantly high rates of taxation is it's right, it's the right thing to do. And you'll hear people talking like that all the time. That's where secular humanism gets you. There is no such thing. Obviously, the founders in their wisdom try and did set up a system that protected religion from the state. But that's not the same as saying that religious values don't belong. People very often, hostile interviewers, go apoplectic. They're getting ready to projectile vomit when I tell them that my political views are shaped by the Bible. You're not allowed to do that. That's not American. That's the desperation and the stupidity that pervades that part of society at the moment.
Yes. Well, what a fascinating conversation. And I feel like we just dipped our toes in the water a bit.
We did.
But Rabbi, I want people to know about your website. Again, can you share the address with us?
Yes, wehappywarriors.com.
All right. And once again, what's that coupon code?
You type in Truth30.
And that's for the
Tower of Power.
The Tower of Power. It makes me think of the Tower of Terror at Disney World, but that's okay. It sounds like a great product. I want to get it myself. And thank you for joining us today. I also want to remind our viewers to pick up a copy of Who Made You God by going to our website at truthandlibertygtn.com. And God bless you all for watching. We'll see you again next time here on Truth and Liberty.